There is something wrong with the way you think. You have known it since childhood. The speed at which your mind dismantles a conversation, while everyone else is still nodding along. The way you see the flaw in the plan before anyone finishes presenting it. The strange, almost painful awareness that most people around you are operating on a completely different frequency. You have carried that feeling your whole life and never had a name for it. Today you get the name and the 7 markers that confirm it. But here is the part that will unsettle you. A sharper mind does not make your life easier. It makes it lonelier. And by the end of this, you will understand exactly why. Habit 1. You argue with yourself before you argue with anyone else. Most people form an opinion and then defend it like a territory. They plant a flag in whatever they believed first, and spend the rest of their lives fighting anyone who tries to move it. They call this conviction. It is not. It is intellectual laziness wearing the uniform of certainty. You do something different. You attack your own ideas before they leave your mouth. There is a cognitive process that researchers in the Journal of Individual Differences have linked directly to higher analytical intelligence. It is called dialectical thinking. It is the ability to hold 2 contradictory ideas in your mind simultaneously and examine both without flinching, not to find a comfortable middle ground. Not to see both sides the way a politician does to avoid commitment, but to genuinely test your own beliefs, the way an engineer stress tests a bridge before letting traffic cross it. Most minds cannot do this. It feels like betrayal to question your own conclusions. It triggers a deep, almost physical discomfort that psychologists call cognitive dissonance. The average person resolves that discomfort by choosing one side quickly and ignoring the other. It feels like relief. It feels like clarity, but it is the intellectual equivalent of closing your eyes during surgery because the sight of blood makes you uncomfortable. The problem does not vanish because you stopped looking at it. Your mind, however, does not flinch. You sit in the discomfort. You let the contradiction breathe. You interrogate your own reasoning the way a prosecutor interrogates a hostile witness, and only after the internal trial is complete do you speak. This is why people find you slow to commit. This is why they mistake your deliberation for indecisiveness. They think you cannot make up your mind. The truth is the opposite. You refuse to make up your mind cheaply. In modern strategic thinking aligned with Robert Greene's perspective, the most dangerous idea is the one you fall in love with before you have tried to kill it. If you find yourself constantly debating inside your own skull, questioning your own conclusions before they harden into beliefs, you are not confused. You are operating a cognitive engine that most people do not possess. And it costs you something. It costs you the blissful ignorance of easy answers. But what it gives you is worth more. It gives you accuracy. Habit 2. You get bored in conversations that excite everyone else. There is a particular kind of boredom that has nothing to do with laziness. It is not the boredom of the unmotivated. It is the boredom of a mind that processes information faster than it is being delivered. You have felt this. Someone is telling a story. The room is engaged. People are leaning in, reacting, laughing at the right moments. And you are already 3 steps ahead. You predicted the punchline. You identified the point they are building toward. You mapped the trajectory of their argument before they reached the second sentence. And now you are sitting there waiting for them to arrive at a destination you reached 90 seconds ago. David Robson, in his research on cognitive processing speed, documented a phenomenon he described as the curse of rapid pattern recognition. Individuals with higher processing speeds do not just think faster. They predict faster. They unconsciously model the trajectory of conversations, arguments, and narratives in real time. The result is that ordinary social interactions begin to feel like watching a movie you have already seen. This is not arrogance. You did not choose to be bored. Your brain is simply running at a clock speed that does not match the conversation, and it creates a strange kind of isolation. You cannot express it without sounding condescending. You cannot explain it without being misunderstood. So you learn to mask it. You nod at appropriate intervals. You fake engagement. You perform interest. But inside your mind is restless. It is hungry for something denser, something that matches its speed. And when it does not find it, it starts to wander, not aimlessly, It wanders constructively. You start connecting ideas from unrelated fields. You start noticing patterns between the conversation, something you read last week, and a problem you have been turning over in your mind for months. This wandering is not a deficiency. Research from Scientific American Mind has repeatedly linked this type of spontaneous ideation to elevated creative intelligence. Your mind is not drifting because it is weak. It is drifting because the current input is beneath its processing capacity, so it reallocates resources to more complex problems in the background. The Japanese chess master Yoshiharu Habu once described this feeling during casual matches. He said that when the game was too simple, his mind would begin solving problems from previous, more complex games entirely without his permission. His brain refused to operate below its capacity. It would find work to do even if he did not assign it. This is not distraction. It is overflow intelligence seeking a worthy container. If ordinary conversations bore you while the rest of the room is captivated, do not pathologize it. Recognize it. Your boredom is a diagnostic tool. It is telling you the altitude at which your mind naturally operates. Habit 3. You change your mind and feel no shame about it. The average person treats a changed mind like a public humiliation. They would rather defend a position they know is flawed than endure the social cost of admitting they were wrong. Their identity is welded to their opinions. To change the opinion is to destabilize the identity. And most people are not structurally sound enough to survive that kind of renovation. You are different. You have changed your mind on things you once believed with absolute certainty. Political positions, career decisions, judgments about people. And instead of feeling defeated by the reversal, you felt something strange. Relief, clarity, the sensation of a misaligned bone snapping back into place. Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying this. In his research on cognitive flexibility, he found that the willingness to update beliefs in the face of new evidence is one of the strongest correlators of superior judgment. Not raw IQ, not education, not experience. The simple willingness to say, I was wrong, and here is what I now believe. Kahneman himself modeled this behavior publicly. He was famous for changing his position during academic debates, sometimes reversing his stated conclusion mid-lecture if a student or colleague presented a stronger argument. His peers found it disarming. Some found it suspicious. How could a man of his stature admit error so casually? But Kahneman understood that intellectual honesty is not a vulnerability. It is the highest form of cognitive discipline. The mind that cannot update is the mind that cannot improve. And the mind that cannot improve is the mind that calcifies into irrelevance. No matter how brilliant it once was, there is a term in intelligence research for this. It is called actively open-minded thinking. It was formalized by psychologist Jonathan Barron, and it measures the degree to which a person seeks out information that contradicts their current beliefs. Most people score low not because they are unintelligent, but because the emotional cost of being wrong is too high for their ego to absorb. Their self-worth is stitched so tightly to their certainty that pulling one thread unravels everything. Your mind does not have this fragility. You can separate what you believe from who you are. You treat your opinions like hypotheses, not heirlooms. And that allows you to move through the world with a speed and accuracy that bewilders people who are still clutching yesterday's conclusions like they are sacred texts. If you change your mind frequently and feel sharper after each revision, that is not inconsistency. That is a mind that prioritizes truth over comfort. Habit 4. You notice what is missing before you notice what is present. Here is a test that separates sharp minds from average ones. Walk into a room. Most people will immediately catalog what is there. The furniture, the people, the noise, the energy. Their perception is additive. They build reality by stacking visible elements. Your mind does the inverse. You walk into the same room, and the first thing you register is what is absent. The person who should be there but is not. The conversation that stopped a half-second too soon when you entered. The detail in the proposal that was conspicuously avoided. The question no one is asking. This is called negative space cognition, and it is terrifyingly rare. In visual art, negative space is the area around and between subjects. Untrained eyes ignore it entirely. But master artists know that the empty space defines the composition more than the objects themselves. The same principle applies to intelligence. What people choose not to say is almost always more revealing than what they do say. What is excluded from an argument often tells you more about the argument's weakness than any flaw in its logic. During the Second World War, the Allied statistician Abraham Wald was asked to determine where to add armor to bomber aircraft. The military had studied the planes that returned from missions and mapped where the bullet holes were concentrated: the wings, the fuselage, the tail. Every analyst recommended reinforcing those areas. Wald said the opposite. He said, armor the areas with no bullet holes: the cockpit, the engines, the fuel system. His reasoning was lethal in its clarity. The planes they were studying had survived. The bullet holes showed where a plane could be hit and still fly home. The areas with no damage were not unscathed. They were the areas where, if hit, the plane never returned at all. Every other analyst saw what was present. Wald saw what was missing, and that single insight saved thousands of lives. If your mind naturally gravitates to gaps, absences, and omissions, you are operating with a form of perception that most people will never develop. You see the world not as it presents itself, but as it tries to hide itself. And that is a form of intelligence that no test can measure, but no adversary can withstand. Habit 5, you feel exhausted after socializing. Not because you dislike people, but because you are processing them. There is a specific kind of fatigue that has nothing to do with physical exertion. You leave a dinner party, a meeting, a casual gathering, and you feel drained in a way that sleep alone cannot fix. People assume you are introverted. They assume you are antisocial. They assume you do not enjoy company. They are wrong on every count. What is actually happening is far more complex. While the average person at that dinner table was engaged in one layer of interaction, the spoken conversation, your mind was simultaneously running 4 or 5 parallel processes. You were tracking the words being said. You were analyzing the micro-expressions that contradicted those words. You were modeling the social dynamics between every person at the table. You were cataloging tone shifts, pauses, deflections. You were constructing a real-time psychological map of the room. You were not just present. You were conducting surveillance. Susan Cain's research on introversion and cognitive load illuminated this exact phenomenon. She found that individuals with higher sensitivity to environmental stimuli are not withdrawing from social situations because they lack interest. They are withdrawing because their brains are consuming vastly more data per interaction than the average person. The fatigue is not emotional. It is computational. Your hardware is overheating because it is running software that most people's systems do not even have installed. There is a historical figure who embodied this with eerie precision. Charles Darwin was known to attend scientific gatherings and dinner parties with colleagues, appear fully engaged, contribute meaningfully to conversation, and then retreat into total isolation for days afterward. His wife, Emma, wrote in letters that Charles would return from social events looking as though he had been carrying furniture for hours. He had not. He had been carrying conversations. But for a mind like his, conversations were furniture, dense, heavy, and requiring enormous effort to move through. Darwin was not fragile. He was processing at a depth that consumed energy most people never expend. His social exhaustion was not weakness. It was the cost of perception. Here is what most people miss about this habit. The exhaustion is not a bug. It is the receipt. It is proof that your mind was working at a level the room could not see. You were not just listening. You were decoding. And decoding human beings in real time is one of the most energy-intensive cognitive tasks that exists. If you consistently feel depleted after social interactions that leave everyone else energized, stop treating it as a disorder. Treat it as a signal. Your mind is not malfunctioning. It is functioning at a resolution so high that the processing cost is visible in your body. Most people leave a conversation with a memory. You leave with a blueprint. Habit 6. You are uncomfortable with your own intelligence. This is the habit that no one expects, and it is perhaps the most telling marker of a genuinely sharp mind. You do not walk around feeling intelligent. In fact, you often feel the opposite. You feel uncertain. You feel like you are missing something. You look at people who are confident in their knowledge, and you wonder how they do it, how they can be so sure, how they can speak with such authority about things that, from your perspective, contain layers of complexity they have not even begun to address. This is not imposter syndrome in the way popular psychology defines it. This is something deeper and more structurally embedded in how advanced cognition works, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Documented extensively in psychological research, reveals an asymmetry that borders on cruelty. People with limited knowledge in a domain dramatically overestimate their competence. They do not know enough to know what they do not know. The inverse is equally true. People with genuine expertise consistently underestimate their ability because they are acutely aware of the vast territory they have not yet covered. Your discomfort with your own intelligence is not a flaw. It is the direct mathematical result of knowing more. The more you learn, the larger the perimeter of your ignorance becomes. A person who has read one book on economics feels like an expert. A person who has read 50 feels like a beginner. The circle of knowledge expanded, and so did the border it shares with everything unknown. There was a British mathematician named Andrew Wiles who spent 7 years in near-total secrecy working on Fermat's last theorem, one of the most famous unsolved problems in mathematics. When he finally presented his proof in 1993, colleagues described him as visibly uncomfortable with the praise. Not because he was humble in some performed, rehearsed way, but because in the process of solving the problem, he had encountered dozens of adjacent problems he could not solve. His success had shown him how much he still did not understand. The solution had made him feel less capable, not more. If you carry a quiet discomfort about your own mind, if you flinch when someone calls you smart, if you feel like a fraud despite evidence to the contrary, stop interpreting that as weakness. It is the clearest sign that your cognitive map is large enough to include its own blank spaces. The fool sees a complete picture because he has never looked beyond the frame. You see an incomplete picture because you know the frame is not the boundary. Habit 7. You have a relationship with time that disturbs other people. You think about death more than the average person. Not in a morbid way, not with anxiety or dread, but with a cold, clear awareness that time is a non-renewable resource, and most people are spending it as if they have an infinite supply. This is the habit that separates a sharp mind from a merely educated one. Education fills the mind. Awareness of mortality sharpens it. You watch people waste hours on arguments that will not matter in 6 months. You watch them chase approval from people they will not remember in 5 years. You see them pour energy into feuds, gossip, status games, and performative busyness, and something inside you recoils, not with judgment, with bewilderment, because you cannot understand how they do not see the clock. Research published by the American Psychological Association found a direct correlation between time, awareness, and strategic thinking. Individuals who maintain a conscious, non-anxious relationship with their own mortality make significantly better long-term decisions. They are less susceptible to sunk cost fallacies. They are more willing to abandon failing projects. They are faster to cut relationships that drain rather than build, not because they are cold, because they understand the math. Every hour spent on something worthless is an hour stolen from something that could matter. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius kept a private journal, never meant for publication, in which he repeatedly reminded himself that he was going to die, not as a punishment, as a calibration tool. He would write variations of the same idea. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. He was not depressed. He was awake. He used mortality the way a navigator uses a compass, not to frighten himself, but to ensure he was still moving in the right direction. In modern strategic thinking aligned with Robert Greene's perspective, this awareness becomes a form of control. You do not act impulsively. You act with awareness of consequence. You understand that time is the only currency you cannot earn back. When someone asks you to commit your time to something, your first internal question is not, "Can I?" It is, Is this worth the hours it will cost me, knowing I will never get those hours back? That calculation runs automatically beneath your conscious awareness, filtering every request, every opportunity, every relationship through a lens that most people do not acquire until it is too late. This is why you sometimes appear distant or detached to people who do not understand you. They think you are aloof. What you actually are is selective. You have an internal economy that values time above money, above status, above social currency. And that economy makes you do things that confuse people, leaving events early, declining invitations without lengthy explanations, spending entire weekends alone with a single problem that fascinates you, cutting conversations short when they stop producing insight. They call it antisocial. You call it arithmetic. If you carry this constant low-frequency awareness of time, if you find yourself unable to waste it the way others do, understand that this is not morbidity. This is a cognitive orientation that the majority of humans never achieve. Most people only develop this awareness in their final years, when the clock becomes impossible to ignore. You developed it early, and that gives you something no amount of intelligence alone can provide. Precision of purpose. So now you have seen them 7 habits, 7 markers etched into the daily behavior of a mind that operates at a frequency most people cannot detect. You argue with yourself before you argue with others. You are bored by conversations that captivate the room. You change your mind without shame. You see what is missing before you see what is present. You are exhausted by the invisible labor of reading people. You are uncomfortable with your own capabilities, and you guard your time with an intensity that others find unsettling. These are not quirks. These are not personality defects dressed in flattering language. These are the operational signatures of a mind that is processing the world at a depth and speed that comes with a very specific cost. Loneliness, not the loneliness of having no one around, the loneliness of having no one who operates the way you do. The loneliness of seeing something clearly and being unable to explain it to someone who does not have the wiring to receive it. The loneliness of living in a world that rewards speed of opinion over quality of thought, certainty over accuracy, loudness over insight. You have spent years wondering if something was wrong with you, if your boredom was a deficiency, if your exhaustion was a weakness, if your inability to stop thinking was a curse. It is not a curse. It is a cost, and it is the cost of carrying a mind that was built for a depth of engagement that the modern world does not demand and does not reward. But here is the part that changes everything. The world does not reward it publicly, but privately in the decisions that shape careers, relationships, and legacies. It is the only thing that matters. The loud mind gets attention. The sharp mind gets results. The popular mind gets followers. The precise mind gets freedom. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not strange. You are simply awake in a room full of people who are still dreaming. And the discomfort you feel is not a signal to go back to sleep. It is the price of sight. So the next time someone tells you that you think too much, that you are too intense, that you need to relax, understand what they are actually saying. They are saying your frequency is making them uncomfortable. And that discomfort is not your problem to solve. It is your proof of concept. But here is the question that should keep you awake tonight. If your mind is this sharp and you are still not using it at full capacity, what exactly are you protecting yourself from? And what would happen if you stopped? That is a shadow worth examining. If this opened your eyes, understand this is only what I can show on this side of the algorithm. There are patterns of the mind I cannot discuss publicly without being suppressed. If you're still here after everything, you're not like most. Subscribe if you haven't.